Shabbos coming to be Erev Pesach is a rather unusual occurrence. We had it about 5 years ago. Before that, it wasn't for about 20 years. The next time it's going to happen is about 20 years hence. Everybody should be gesund and stark for the next time that Shabbos comes to become Erev Pesach. But the fact that it's so rare, it's something miyuchad. There's special halachas, special dinim. And in history, we see that Shabbos, that was Erev Pesach, changed the history of Klal Yisrael. There was, when Klal Yisrael was in Eretz Yisrael, towards the end of Bayis Sheni, there were a group of Chachamim who were the Nesi'im of the Kal. Those Nesi'im were called B'nai B'Seira. It was a family. And came Pesach, fell on Erev Shabbos. And the B'nai B'Seira had a safek. They weren't sure if Korban Pesach is Docha Shabbos. And therefore, they put out a question. We don't know if we should shech the Korban Pesach today. Now think about this situation where you've got all Klal Yisrael being Ola Regel, and now we don't know if we're going to shech the Korban Pesach on Shabbos. They weren't sure if Korban Pesach is Docha Shabbos. Came Hillel, and Hillel said, "What is your safek?" We learned from Shmaya V'Avtalyon that Korban Pesach is Docha Shabbos. Just like all Karbanos of the Chagim, all special Karbanot that we have are Docha Shabbos, also the Korban Pesach that falls on Erev Shabbos is Docha Shabbos. L'chara, we have a Pella, right? Now, what happened? First, the end of the story. The B'nai B'Seira stood up and said, because you knew this halacha and we didn't know this halacha, therefore we are stepping down from being the Nesiim, and you, Hillel, will now be the Nasi. And for the rest of history in Klal Yisrael, it's the house of Hillel that were the Nesiim. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is a descendant of Hillel. Right? The Nesiim for the rest of history are from the house of Hillel. History changed because of Erev Pesach that falls on Shabbos. But it's a Pella. They stood down from being the Nesiim because they didn't know this halacha. Why did this make them say we're not worthy of being the Nesiim? But there's a further question. What? They didn't know that we bring Karbanos on Shabbos? We bring the Korban Tamid on Shabbos. We bring the Karbanos of Shabbos on Shabbos. If a Yom Tov falls on Shabbos, we bring the Karbanos of Yom Tov on Shabbos. They didn't know that halacha. What was their suffix? So I think that the pshat is that the B'nai B'Seira thought that a Korban Pesach is different from all other Karbanos of Yom Tovim, because they thought that Korban Pesach is a preparation for Yom Tov. Because after all, the ikar of a Korban Pesach is the achila. The ikar of a carbon pesach is that the people are going to eat it. Has to be shechted for the people who are going to eat the carbon pesach. And therefore, carbon pesach is different than every other carbon. So they thought that carbon pesach is a hachana. If it's a hachana, then Shabbos is not meichin for something during the week. Even things that have to be done before Yom Tov, and the Yom Tov carbon is totally on that. For example, by Shavuos, baking the shtei alechem, it's not Toch Shabbos. Because the baking shtei alechem is a hachana. We don't do a hachana for a carbon of Yom Tov on Shabbos. It's another example in Masechet Beitza too. A carbon that's not Toch Shabbos, that's only a hachana for the carbon for Yom Tov, you don't do it on Shabbos. That was their mistake. Pshat is that Hillel said to them, right, that you're making a big mistake in the whole understanding of Carbon Pesach. Carbon Pesach, shechting the Carbon Pesach is not a achana. Shechting the Carbon Pesach is an avoda. It's only preparing for eating the Carbon Pesach at night. The answer is yes, but that's the avoda. The avoda of Carbon Pesach, and I think the kernel of this idea I saw from a shiur given by Rabbi Victor Miller, that the ikar of the avoda of Carbon Pesach, even though it's there for me to eat, that's the idea. Because the goyim think that you have HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Kadosh, and therefore everything is done for the Kedusha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is wrong. You are Kadosh. A human being is Kadosh. You're living in this world is Kadosh. And therefore shechting the Carbon Pesach for your use is Kedusha. That's the carbon. And that's a whole tfisa in Avodas Hashem. That the pshat of an Avodas Hashem is, this is doing for Hashem by myself and what I'm doing. My physical life is a life of Kedusha. Said B'nai B'Seira, we missed it. And if we missed this ikaron, we can't be the Nasiim of Klal Yisrael. They stepped down. Because that's a yesod in the whole approach to Torah, the whole approach to life, the whole approach to Avodas Hashem. And be'etzem, that's what the Carbon Pesach is there to teach. Our Yetzias Mitzrayim is the change of being purely physical beings to becoming holy human beings, to becoming Kadosh. Mamleches Kohanim v'Goy Kadosh. That's the essence of what Klal Yisrael is. That's what Yetzias Mitzrayim teaches. And truth is that that's what Shabbos is all about. Shabbos, like we all know, the Maral is 7. That's the Kedusha of the Bria. That's what Shabbos is. We eat on Shabbos, right? We celebrate our Shabbos by eating on Shabbos because Shabbos is Kedusha of the Bria. I'm Mekadosh Li'achila. Making our lives Kodesh. And therefore, in truth, when Shabbos comes on Erev Pesach, Shabbos is the beginning of Pesach. Perhaps that's why the Torah calls Pesach Shabbos, Mimachras HaShabbos. Because Shabbos and Pesach are the same idea. And maybe that's the Amkus behind Reb Meir, who says you get rid of all your chametz before Shabbos. Because Shabbos, When Shabbos comes Erev Pesach, your Pesach is starting early. And therefore there's a hashkafic idea of the starting your Pesach from before Shabbos. Because Shabbos is already your Pesach. And therefore, the Yesod, the specialness of an Erev Shabbos, which is Pesach, or an Erev Pesach, which is Shabbos, right? Its specialness is that we have 2 days. We have Mamash Shabbos to get started in working on this whole concept of what we stand for as an Am Kadosh, that the Kedusha is within us. And the Kedusha is in what we do in our physical lives. And that leads into the Pesach, the Hakara, that we became a nation. Our becoming a nation is through that recognition of Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach stands for Duma Akrava, for me. Because I'm Kaddish. It's a korban that serves me. And that's the etzem that korban. Because I am Kaddish. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants in this world. That's thought on Shabbos Erev Pesach. I'd like to speak also about Parshas Tzav. Parshas Tzav is now 2, and there's something about Tzav that also connects to Pesach. In Parshas Tzav, we talk about a korban, which is a very special korban, the korban toda. The Midrashim talk about how the korban toda is a very essential korban. It's one of the most basic korbanos of life. Because toda, which is thanks, is the same root as modeh, which is to admit, which is the same root as hodah, which is recognition. Those are all what is inherent in toda. And we say Mizmor L'Soda every day. Even when I come late, I try not to miss out on Mizmor L'Soda. Because it's a recognition. Kodesh Baruch Hu gives me everything. Ho'asanu, lo'anachnu. Right? And Be'etzem, Pesach is the time of the recognition that Kodesh Baruch Hu made us into a nation. And it's such a Dvar Pella that on the Yom Tov, which should be the Yom Tov of recognition of Hashem, we can't bring a korban toda. We don't say Mizmor L'Soda. Starting, well, Shabbos we don't do it anyway. Tomorrow we'll do it, right? We don't say Mizmor L'Soda because it's chametz. You can't bring a korban with chametz because it's Pesach, right? Since it's not a chiyuv. Pesach should be a time everybody should bring a korban toda. And yet, Kodesh Baruch Hu makes it work out that no, korban toda can't bring on Pesach. Why not? The mamish seems to be contradictory. We find that what's the chametz of korban toda? You have the lachmei toda, right? The lachmei toda are 10 of them are chametz. Ask the Ramban, the Torah in Parshas Tzav tells us that Parshas Vayikra tells us that you're not allowed to bring chametz on the mizbeach. You can't have any korban which is called sar v'chol devash. Ask the Ramban, but the Torah says except korban reishis, the korban bikurim, which is the shtei lechem and shavuos, that is chametz, right? Says the Ramban, the Estes Kasha here in Parshas Tzav, why didn't the Torah also say, except for the korban toda? That also is chametz. Why does the Torah say only with the exception of korban reishis? It should have said also the exception of korban toda. He gives a teretz. It's very unclear. I don't know what he means. It's very low barur what the Ramban uses as his answer. But I think perhaps the pshat is like this. Shtei alechem on Shavuos is be'etzem the carbon, right? That's what you're supposed to. It's a minchas bikurim. That's the carbon. By a toda, the carbon is the behemoth. The lechem is an addendum. And it's even possible to have a carbon toda without lechem under certain halachic situations. The lechem is an addendum. So the lechem is there. Why? Because, the Mefarshim explain, there's a lot of bread that you bring, so you invite people. So when you give toda to Hashem, like we say in the Ma'ashiv, right? We say that L'cha ezbach zebach toda, right? Negda no l'chol amo. We want everybody to know about it. We want to announce it. That's a personal expression of thanks. We have a concept. You don't make a chasana on Chol HaMoed. Says Gemara, why? Because ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha. When you have the simcha, the chag, which is a national simcha, you don't mix it with a personal simcha. Maybe that's the idea. Carbon toda is a personal simcha, a personal toda. On Pesach, we want to concentrate on the toda of Klal Yisrael in the recognition of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what He does for us as an Am. Ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it that you can't bring your personal carbon toda on Pesach in order that you should dafka concentrate on the carbon toda of Klal Yisrael, the Yom Tov of Pesach, which is the idea of the recognition of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everybody should have a chag kosher, a sameach, and a good Shabbos.